Can you tell us a little bit about how firmly embedded the family planning committees are? Like, does each village have some official who's a member of it? Are they in nearby villages? How?
The main family planning officials were in the township, nearby town, but everybody in the village was to kind of who was an official was deputized to enforce this family planning. I mean, this was the state policy, and they took this really, really, really seriously. And if there were too many babies born in a village, every official, every civil servant would have their pay docked and would be ineligible for promotion. So there was a lot of incentive for people to squeal on their neighbors. And um, there was just such great propaganda accompanying this. I mean, China was going to get rich if they kept down the population. This was, if you abide by this, your income is going to go up, your children are going to be well educated, or your single child. Um, People believed, actually, even this family believed, they believed in the policy. They didn't follow the policy, but they believed in it. They were very, and are, very loyal Chinese citizens. So this is the birth mom, Zanhua. Um, she's in the bamboo grove where her twins were born. It's kind of coincidence that she's holding up two pomelos, but this was like, I guess, a fairly typical young couple. They got married, had a baby. First baby was a girl. The law allowed some rural families whose first child was a girl to have a second. They were supposed to wait. They didn't. They had a girl. And so actually they were kind of happy with their two girls, but the paternal grandfather was like, you got to have a boy, you got to have a boy. And so they really pressured Zenwa to get pregnant again. And she was, sure she was going to have a boy this time. She was very big in her pregnancy. And she gave birth secretly in a bamboo grove. They had a little hut there. That's where you get the daughters of the bamboo grove. And lo and behold, I guess they had twins. Um, and this could have been a disaster, but actually they're an interesting family, and the birth father was kind of pleased with the twins. He felt like it was kind of a rebuke to his father, who was so insistent. And he's a lovely man. His name is Song, and I mean, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't drink, he's very soft spoken, and he kind of, I say in the book that if he had lived in a different society, he might have been a stay-at-home dad. He just loved taking care of his daughters. And so anyway, I went into the village. He wasn't there at the time. They were living in, what was like a log cabin, and the mother and the daughter spoke to me. I don't know if you're going to get the sound on this.
什么？姐姐早一点回来陪我玩耍。姐姐早点回来陪我玩。Sister comes back sooner to play with me.
Yeah, the little girl is talking about how her twin was taken away and how she missed her twin. Actually, she didn't really know her twin. This was after they had these twins, they tried to hide them, and they had all sorts of kind of silly ruses. But one of them was they separated them, and they left one twin with an aunt and an uncle in the same village. And that's the girl who was stolen. Her name was Fang Fang, and she was pretty old when she was taken. She was close to 2 years old. She could walk, she could talk. Actually, the walking might have been part of the problem because she liked to wander around. She was very precocious, and she was taken in a very violent home invasion. Um, a group of men, about 10 of them, burst into the house where she was with her aunt. They were alone, and they immobilized the aunt, and they took Fang Fang was her name, and the aunt tried to run after them, Actually, the whole village tried to run after them, but they had a car and they got away. Anyway, um, these people were very nice. They said to me, um, the mom said, come back sometime. I'll make you a meal, bring our daughter. And I was like, yeah, maybe, you
They
know.
made you promise to get their daughter back, the other twin back for them.
There was it was not a promise I was going to make, but I did tell them I would try. And, it was interesting because um,
Let me ask where did they think the other twin had ended up at this point? Like what was their idea of like where that other twin might have been?
they really had no idea. And, this is a funny thing is at this point, this is 2009, and Chinese adoption was very well known in the US. I mean, especially in New York. It seemed like, a lot of people I knew had adopted girls from China. They were, kind of the perfect adoptees. They were healthy. Their moms didn't smoke or drink generally. A lot of people wanted to adopt Chinese baby girls, but adoption, it wasn't like a secret exactly in China, but it was not publicized. So there were all sorts of theories, and one of them was that the babies were being trafficked for organ donation. And I mean, that might seem crazy, but no rumor was more ridiculous than any other rumor. It's that the baby would be in the US would be, equally implausible. Um, but I mean, I had a pretty good idea of where this baby had gone because this one orphanage in a nearby city, Shaoyang, which is I guess a second tier city in Hunan, um, had adopted out a lot of kids. These orphanages were part of social welfare institutes. They were run by the government, um, but they weren't very well funded. And when a child was adopted, even though most of the money went through Beijing, and I never found any corruption on the Beijing end of it. um, the adoptive families were required to make a donation of um, $3,000 cash, $100 bills. You brought it when you went to China. They came to China to adopt and turn it over. At one point, it went up to 5,000, and this was, a lot of money. This was a lot of money. It was a lot of money for anybody. It was a lot of money in rural China, and that money was, kind of running things. It was running these social welfare institutes. I mean, some of it was obviously pilfered, but most of it was, just going to run the show and fund family planning. So it became, had become a business. Um, so I went back to Beijing, to my office in Beijing after this trip. I wrote a series of stories. I wrote a story about how parents said their babies were taken for adoption. And I had what we call a sidebar. I don't know how many of you are journalists, but a short thing about this little girl. It's kind of like a sob story. This little 9-year-old girl wants her twin back, blah, blah, blah. She wants to play with her. That was from the little video I'd made. And I started to kind of look around on social media to see if I could find this adoptee. And this sounds impossible, but this is 2009 and social media was very open and much, people weren't as careful. And these adoptive parents were really proud of their girls, and there were a lot of photos of adoptive kids on social media, actually mostly on Yahoo at that time, because there were different orphanage groups um, of adoptive parents, were supporting the orphanages, sending money and clothes, and they had organized themselves in these groups in Yahoo. And so I had a pretty good sense of which orphanage had handled her. And I also knew what she looked like. I mean, to me, babies kind of look the same, but I had met her 9-year-old twin. And although the family didn't know, I was pretty sure they were identical. And, um, and she was taken when she was older. So I started reading things from this orphanage in Shaoyang, and I found one family who had I don't have the whole thing up here, but there was one family, they were in Texas, they were evangelical Christians, and they had actually started a little fund called Adopt the World to help people adopt. And they wrote about how they had adopted this little girl in December 2002. She was taken in like May of 2002, and they had posted some photos of her, and this was one of the photos. This is what she looked like when she was adoptive, and there's some other. There were actually two photos of her online, and so having read a lot of police procedurals, I made kind of these like spreadsheets of Chinese baby girls. The others were just pictures I had picked out randomly on the internet. Um, but they had, and I sent the pictures of the family with a very sort of vague note. Oh, these are maybe, adoptees from this area. Maybe you recognize somebody. No, this thing didn't come out in full, but anyway, they immediately wrote back to me and they had identified the two correct pictures. This was this one, and I go back here, and the other one is down here. So I was pretty sure I had the right kid. And I mean, this is where I feel kind of guilty because I hadn't really thought through the consequences of this. I had set up this challenge for myself, and I I realized immediately that, this girl in Texas whose name was Esther, Fong Fong was Esther, was 9 years old, and I couldn't out a 9-year-old girl as being a stolen child. And, meanwhile, the adoptive family had written to me through intermediaries saying, like, please don't write anything. We can't cope with it right now. The adoptive father had died the year before. There were actually two girls adopted from China. And
The mother is named Marcia, is that right?
the mother's named Marcia, and she had adopted. It was her second marriage. I think her husband's third. They both had adult children, and yeah, they had adopted one and then adopted another. They were living in a very rural part of Texas, and I just, what could I do? I took the material I had, the photos, and I had some videos, and I sent them again through an intermediary to them. And I said, I'm not going to write anything, but here's what I found out. And I contacted the family in China and I said, I think she's safely and, with a good home. And I didn't tell them that the adoptive father had died, but I just don't think you can contact her right now. But she's alive and seems to be well. And, you know, and that's it. End of story.